I think the big change in myself over the last 3 or 4 years as an entrepreneur has been about being more data driven. And you have your instincts, but then you back it with data, and then you're golden.
This week's guest on Questions I Wanted to Ask is chef and founder of Love 15 Patisserie, Pooja Dhingra, who's also known as the Macaroon Queen of India. Pooja and I spoke about her ability to be resilient while the various challenges of business throws at you, her love for creating content through her books, through her podcast, and her Instagram account, while she runs a successful business, and how she manages to do all of this together in the limited time that she had. Thank you so much for coming on Questions I Wanted to Ask. It's a pleasure having you.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. Pooja, tell me, I think your third book is it the third book or the fourth book? Sixth book. Oh my God. You wrote your first book at what age?
I was about 26, I think, yes. I was 26 years old. I always wanted to write a cookbook. I grew up baking, and I grew up baking in India at a time where baking wasn't as accessible. The internet wasn't what it is today. So finding recipes was tough. So it was always a dream that I struggled so hard finding recipes for an Indian audience. So my dream was that when I came back from Paris, I was like, I have to write a book that you can go to your local kirana store and buy like Amul butter and Amul cream and come home and start baking. So that was the first one.
Interesting. The reason I asked you about the book was I want to take a step back and go around 10 years back when you started baking and you came back from France. As an entrepreneur, the first thing that you face is uncertainty, right? You don't technically, we all say, oh, you have a vision of building this and that. But I feel कि ऐसा कुछ नहीं होता है. You just know the immediate step, right? कि हाँ, like in your case, maybe it was, I want to bake macaroons and, get people to like it. What is that process that you said, okay, I'm baking macaroons, but at the same, and I'm selling them for a commercial purpose, but at the same time I want to write a book, and then I want to do this, and what is that mind that's working which is saying, okay, abhi ye karna, how does your mind think all these new things? And I'm talking about 10 years back when
I'm going to be super cheesy here and say it's not the mind, but it's the heart. So you follow the rhythm of, I believe in purpose, and I believe in calling, and I believe in the universe and all those things. And I always feel like my life has always been about me just listening to like the calls or the whispers of I sound very Oprah like right now. But
please do that. I love this conversation.
No, but that's exactly, like I feel like intelligently you can sit and plan and say, this is what I want to do. But, inside all of us, we have this sort of feeling that we know what pulls us, right? Like I know when I tried to go to law school for about 2 weeks, and within the first 2 weeks, I was like, I just knew that something is not feeling right. So I try to, use this internal navigation system and be like, more than, will this make me a lot of money? Will it be about fame? No, it's about, is this aligned with how I'm feeling right now? Is this where I want to, so that's the way I kind of take it. And I don't I just, I wanted to talk about my struggles of being an entrepreneur. So I did a podcast. I wanted to write a baking book to help people so that they don't have to go through the same thing as me. So that's how the books came about. So it's all about, it's not like this big strategy. Everyone is like, how do you build your personal brand? And so I didn't even know I was building a personal brand. I just knew that I was just doing things that were calling, that felt like a calling, and I was following that. And I think that, when you do that and you align with purpose, things tend to seem to fall into place.
But tell me, at the age of 20-25, how do you know what's your purpose?
You know what your purpose is for then. I don't think your purpose is the same through your life, right? I feel like through different kind of times in your life, your purpose kind of keeps shifting and moving, and the base of it. I mean, I knew when I was 16, I was like, this is what I want to, someday I want to open a cafe. Like I used to have like, visions of what that would look like, what that would feel like, which is why when I started in law, I knew that something doesn't match and I have to follow what I really want to do. So, and I think everyone does have that at some, you're probably not listening to it, or you're probably not like paying enough attention. But that's what passion and ambition and all those things kind of come together, right? Like the reason why people say follow your passions, I don't think it just means like, if you love something, make it your job, but like kind of try to understand where it's taking you. Is it teaching you something new? So that's how I use it.
But tell me, self awareness is one thing, but actually getting to kind of execute your passion, or actually, a lot of us are self aware. हमें पता है कि हमारी strengths क्या है, negative क्या है. हमें ये भी पता होता है कि this is what we really like or enjoy, right? But a lot of times you don't. This thing, how do you get to actually, starting to do things which you feel are your calling or your purpose or whatever?
I just feel, and I've thought about this a lot. I think for me as a person growing up, I didn't have that pressure of perfection. In school, I wasn't like your topper. I was like an average student. My parents had not too many expectations as long as I was hardworking. That was all, like my brother was the intelligent one and I was the hardworking one. And I had to always work extremely hard to get even like things that came so easily to my friends or So I've always been that person who's ready to do the work and not expect too many results. And but that just became a part of my personality. And then when I actually moved to Switzerland and I started studying hospitality and I was doing the things that I loved doing, I saw the for the same effort that I was putting, I saw that, the rewards were like exponentially higher. So I think in me, it's just about that childhood thing of like, there's no fear of failure. There's no fear of agar ye karenge, and you work so hard and because the goal was never the final result. The goal is always a process for me. So it's not about let's build something and then get to that, the end result is this, but it's like, I'm really enjoying creating this and this is the process I love. For me, seeing a thought turn into something and like, seeing that process is why I do certain things rather than, so for me, writing the book was the most important part because I was testing recipes, I was working on it, etc. Once the book is done, like all this promoting it is tedious for me. Like that part is not like joy, but writing it is joy. So once it's done, then I don't expect anything from it. I'm like, have I given it my best? Have I done what I wanted to? So I think it comes from there, because I've seen friends and family who have such high expectations of themselves. They have such high, like, this fear of failure that I'll do it. And if I won't succeed, kya hoega? And, so for me, I don't have that. I'm like, just put in the work and whatever has to happen will happen.
But tell me now, when you've built this big brand, people call you the Macroom Queen of India, and this thing, does that fear of failure come now?
It did, and it does, and it did last year, especially at the start of the pandemic, right? Because
which is like a die for all the entire F&B businesses.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so for me, that was actually the time where it wasn't so much about fear of failure, but almost seeing like everything that you had built from scratch, just kind of, there was a possibility of it all going away. So we were at a stage where we were like, acha, I have a pros and cons list of keeping the business alive or shutting it down. And I was like, I just patted myself on the back for completing 10 years of Love 15. And I was like, I said, okay, 10 years means it's a given now. You can, the business you can call it successful. But reality was something completely different. So it was more of, there was not a fear of failure, but it was a fear of losing, this tangible thing that I built.
Yeah. And then you actually had to let go of some of them as well.
Yeah, I did. And it was heartbreaking because it was like, it was in my head, like that was never something that would ever happen. Because you built something from scratch, you built it with, so much love. And this was the realization of that childhood dream, that cafe that I used to have visions of, this was it. And, it was finally like, it was profitable, it was doing really well. And, it was great. There was under no circumstance was there a time where I would say, ki, we'll have to shut this. So when that option even like, was floated in front of me, I was like devastated. I said, how is this possible? But then it came to a situation of, like cutting the arm to save the body sort of thing. And looking back, it was the best decision that I could have made.
I mean, considering none of us knew how long this was going on and all of that.
Exactly.
I mean, but I have to say that it was one of my favorite outlets of yours. Though I still miss the Lokhandwala outlet. I have to tell you this. I have a lot of memories from the Lokhandwala outlet.
Really?
A lot of firsts there for me. So, I mean, some of the, I guess that's what the beauty of about building a brand is, right? So many people, associate your brand with first and memories that are built and all. And it's amazing. And, I was constantly thinking that, even with your chat, I realized that you're somebody who's a very spiritually awakened or a self-aware person, right? Which means you're very intuitive. How do you switch on to that logical side when you have to take such a strong decision, like, say, shutting down an outlet? And women especially struggle with that, if I'm not wrong.
I think for me, it was I had my back against the wall. I had no other option. And I think the big change in myself over the last 3 or 4 years as an entrepreneur has been about being more data driven. And you have your instincts, but then you back it with data, and then you're golden. So everything pointed towards, instinctively. Also, I knew that if I didn't do this, we would be in a terrible place. So there was, that plus the data to back it up. So I think it was heartbreaking. Like I was, my friends were tired of me crying every day. They were just like, okay, you got to stop crying now. But yeah, it just, I still remember when I put out I wrote an article and I put it out when I shut it. The love that cafe has, I didn't even realize that's something that I built. I knew that I loved it, but to actually see the love that people had for it, for me, that was mind-blowing. And that just it gave me a reassurance that I'll be fine. No matter what I do, if I can build something like this once, I can build it again. And it gave me kind of a confidence and self-belief in my own abilities more than anything else.
Interesting. I mean, I'm feeling emotional about this fact that, when you shut down the Lokhandwala, this thing, I was like, oh my God, this is where the first time my daughter ever had a Mac room, right? And she was very, very small at that time. And I used to take her for little, like those Mac room dates. And her love for Mac room started from there. And, it continues. And there are stories around it, which I'm probably going to tell you later. But it's beautiful what you created. When you're at the beginning of a creation, whether it's a business, whether even for that matter, a book, right? We all know that you write a book, but the actual buying of that book doesn't support the numbers. You still went ahead and you self-published it, right? What is that conviction that you had in your mind saying ki nahi, main to book karungi publish and it'll do well?
So the first 2 books I didn't self-publish. The first 2 books, the first one was Penguin and the second one was Hachette. And I mean, I just saw the numbers. They were insane. They were great. I don't think any other Indian cookbook or any other book at that has sold that level. And for me, my business sort of brain went into play and I said, this is great, but I think I can pull this off myself. And if I can pull this off myself, there's, I put in my whole heart, soul, effort, all of that in it. And I pretty much have distribution. I have a back end that can sort it out, because we do shipping, the business has all that inbuilt. And I, anyways, recipe testing, all of that I have free. So it just made logical sense. So I actually used the revenue from the first 2 books and saw the sales numbers and then used that as I didn't start my first book and say I'll self-publish. I went through that process and saw, actually had proof of concept and then said, okay, this works. This is great. I think I can do it. Let me try it.
Interesting. So between books, between content, between running a full-fledged and retail business is generally very operationally heavy, right? And trying new recipes. And you're a young girl, whatever said and done, you have a social life and family, etc. How do you kind of figure this time? Like, what is your approach to time management, if I have to ask?
So, to be very honest, the first few initial years of Love 15, there was nothing but work. I started young. I started 23. And if anyone set up a business, the kind of uh, time and energy it takes from you. And so I was working 14, 15 hours a day. And then I was exhausted to do anything. So I lost out on friendships. I ended relationships. I didn't have time for anything. My parents barely saw me. And looking back, would I do it differently? Yeah, I would love to say yes, but then I wouldn't have been able to achieve what I have if I hadn't put in that time. After 10 years or 12 years of doing this, I realized that that's not a sustainable lifestyle. And that's not something that I dream of living, or a life that I dream of living. Yes, running your business requires a lot of time, a lot of effort. And if you are bootstrapped and you're doing it yourself, you don't really have the help that you need. So my goal is eventually to get to a place where, I've hired really great, talented people to do much smarter than me, who can do a much better job than me. And I can do all the creative work and do the stuff that I truly enjoy doing. And for now, I just, I kind of dabble in it. I balance everything. I made it, the pandemic really helped kind of realign all those things and restructure time and understand where your energy is going, to who it's going, all of those things. So yeah, I make it a point to leave work at 6:30 now. I come in at 9, and I take my Sundays off. So I kind of balance everything between that week. And the whole idea is to not get overwhelmed by the amount of work there is. That happened to me once last month, where there was a lot happening, and it was a lot happening all together, and it was a bit overwhelming. And I had to just step back and like arrange everything and say, okay, what is happening today? Can you handle today? Take it one day at a time. And then after 3 days, I was like, okay, I got this. It's fine.
The reason I'm asking is also there are a lot of us now who, thanks to the internet and thanks to the pandemic, a lot of us are doing side hustles. So, for example, I work full time on something else, but I'm doing this podcast because this is something I was passionate about, right? A lot of the stuff that you're doing, whether it's content on Instagram and other platforms, or even your book, which is something, even your podcast, how do you then divide time between a full time, full-fledged, that behemoth of a business that you've created, and following your passion? Are they part of the work day, or do you keep separate days, or do you keep hours, or how does that work for you? How do you bring consistency to doing passion, to following your passion also?
For me, I think it's very important to do these side things because a lot of my creative energy comes from them.
Sure.
A lot of, because when you're doing one thing consistently, you sort of, I feel, you're sort of, you get into a zone where you're just on autopilot. So doing these things and throwing yourself in really difficult situations, whether it is learning a new language or, writing a book or doing a podcast or whatever, I feel like it brings back creativity and joy to my actual day job. So I actually love it. I make sure that my week is structured in a way that I have certain number of hours every week that I'm doing this. I obviously am very lucky to have a very large team now that helps me with a lot of things. So even for the book, I had like 4 assistants working on the recipes while I was, so I'm, it's delegation that's very important. It's hiring the right people that's very important for me at this stage. And then I managed to, fit everything in.
Interesting. Tell me specifically more to do with content. When you started, posting content, I don't know, was it deliberate, or was it something that you said, oh, I really enjoy this, let me do this more? Or was it like, oh, it's going to aid my business?
I have the reverse problem of everybody. People have to tell me stop posting, because I have friends who like spend hours making a post, thinking of a caption. And I'm like, when Instagram first started, I've been on it for 10 years. Yeah. And I actually moved phones. I used to have a BlackBerry, and then I saw a friend from the States who posted this, this sepia color picture. And I looked at it and I said, it was love. And I was like, what is this? And he's like, oh, it's an app called Instagram. And I was like, oh, I want it. He's like, yeah, but you need to get an iPhone for it. And I had, just had a BlackBerry, and it was Love 15's first year of business. And then I sold the BlackBerry, got an iPhone. And for me, I was hooked. Like, I don't even know, the phone became an extension of my hand, and I was just documenting. I've always been a a documenter or a storyteller. Like even now I have pictures, I have like, a friend was over the other day and she, we were going through old school albums and she picked out an album and she's like, you realize we were 12 or 14 in this picture. And she's like, it's not an event. Like nothing is happening. We were all just meeting at your house to chill, but there are photographs of this day, and actually when taking this by film and getting it processed and all of that wasn't just, so easy as it is today. So I think for me, that's always been the case. And I've always been that person. So I have like every memory from every school thing, from every college thing. I have like first tickets of first dates and, like everything that is stored. So for me, it just became like a way to document all of that now online. And, slowly over time, I started seeing the power of actually what a community can do. And, also not feeling so alone, right? Because entrepreneurship is a very lonely journey. And when you are, and when you are, I don't have co-founders. That's one thing I really wish I did. And it just suddenly started feeling like, oh, I'm not alone, like this person is also doing this. And and I just, over time that, stories have changed, the way I look at things have changed, but I still try to be as true to what I do on a daily basis. And it's all like, like I told you, it's never been a strategy. It's always been about, oh, this is how I'm living my life in a way.
I can share a part of my life or whatever work I do, etc. Interesting. But tell me, you mentioned about the fact that you never had a co-founder. And I know, and today, if you go to any VC or any guy who funds the company, the first thing they will ask you is who's your co-founder, right? And you know this. Yeah. Has it ever what have been those thoughts when I'm sure you've had conversations, finance related conversations, funding related conversations, yes, no, whatever. What have you ever pondered about, the fact that, oh, if I had a co-founder, I would have maybe been able to do this or stuff like that. And the fact that you're a woman running it, what has been that like?
Oh, yeah, those are very loaded questions.
Yes.
I think
two loaded questions.
Two loaded questions. So I'll take the second question first. So being a woman in this industry, anyways, and being a young woman, so I always thought it was because of my youth. I never thought that, this person is being like that because I'm a girl. I thought he just thinks I'm inexperienced. Yeah. And I just very early on knew that there's a lot of discrimination, but instead of focusing on the discrimination, I'm just going to focus on the positive parts, because there's both, right? There's always, every situation has two sides. And simple things like, people not taking you seriously when you're younger. It's a male dominated industry. You want to rent property, you want to buy expensive machinery. Everyone wants to know where the man is. I've been asked, where's your husband? Where's your father? One guy was even like, oh, aapke husband off ho gaye kya? Like at 23, I was asked if my husband died. Is that why you're doing this alone? So to me, I decided that, I was very lucky to have my father who, loved looking at this part of the business. So I was like, okay, if a landlord wants to meet you, just come with me and, meet and this and that. So for the first few years, he did that. And now, I've just, now I don't think it matters anymore as much. Sometimes it still does, but I've just become resilient and I don't kind of, look at that part of it. What I do differently is I make sure that at least I build a team in which there's, a lot of equality. And we have, out of the 70 people that we have, almost 50% are women. And that's the idea that, you can change. The great thing about being a CEO of this company is that you can dictate what the culture is going to be like and actually create individuals who then go on and spread that message later. That was the second one. And the first one was about the co-founder. I dream of like this day that I will have this perfect co-founder who I can share responsibilities and part of the business with. That hasn't happened yet. And so I'm still looking if anybody wants to join Love 15. For most funding related questions and things like that, we've gone through our first round 4 years ago. and we're doing a second one very shortly. It's not been such an issue about a co-founder, but the team is, who the team is has been obviously very important, and rightly so. I think for me that also, hiring the right people, identifying who can complement your strengths. For me, that it's been a real journey understanding that whole
Learning.
part. Yeah.
And what has helped you most in of course experiences and your own failures and mistakes are the biggest learner,
Yeah.
but besides that, is there anything else that, and the reason I'm asking you is because there are a lot of women like you, who want to learn, not just women, I think men also,
Yeah.
who don't have backgrounds in entrepreneurship or who are building something which is just completely from scratch. What are those guiding lights or pillars that have supported you in that process?
So I actually got a leadership coach last year.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot changed for me once I actually had someone who I could talk to about work and identify my own shortcomings, identify my own strengths. And I think that as self-actualized as anyone is, when you're in a work situation and you're in a leadership role, people want different things from you at different times. And for you to kind of understand what that is and how to set boundaries, how to identify how to hire better things, everything. So for me, actually getting a leadership coach truly helped because I could identify, see all my blind spots. Even the expectations from yourself, right? I would be so angry when I would be like, why didn't I see this coming? Why didn't I do this? And she would just be like, how can you blame yourself for, not having the experiences you without actually going through the whole process? So I think it was a big mindset shift in that manner. So I think any mentor, any leader, anyone that you can actually talk to, get help, because someone's been there, someone knows how, I'm not like, reinventing the wheel here. So for me, that really helped. And I also feel like, in this whole, you always have to show that you are successful and you are, great and you're doing amazing and all of those things. I think for me, what has really helped is always being true and honest and vulnerable as much as possible. So even when I go to mentors or even when I go and ask for help, it's never about like, it's like, okay, this is what I'm struggling with. Can you? And when someone sees you being really honest and open about your struggles, they're more likely to come and help you and tell you, hey, I can figure a solution out for this. So yeah, your own life experiences and failures will teach you, but get help from mentors, teachers, coaches.
But tell me, when you are vulnerable, and this is an interesting subject. When you are vulnerable and you reach out to mentors, sometimes in your industry and sometimes outside, right? There is this fear of being judged. There is this fear of being taken weak. How do you balance that? Because sometimes when you're reaching out, you have to tell the exact story, like the situation that you're in, but you can equally be judged and be put in a box saying, okay, this business is run by whatever, someone weak or whatever. How do you take that? How do you tackle that?
I never really think about that. For me, it's as long as I know how I feel and who I am, it doesn't matter what you are going to think of, what I can do or cannot do. So I never, and this is something that my father always tells me as well, is that to remove this fear, because these are all like fear reactions, right? You fear someone's going to judge you. You fear someone before anything has even ever happened. Maybe they won't judge you. Maybe they've been in the same place, right? So I think it's very crucial to, I know it's easy to say, and it's, like when you're actually in that vulnerable position, it's a bit tough. But from experience, I've learned that honesty, it just goes a really long way, and people and true bravery comes from that to me. So that's, at least that's the mindset that I have, and that's the philosophy that I follow. I just feel that the world will be a better place if everyone just shows their true vulnerabilities and doesn't try to hide everything.
Interesting. Tell me, in a business which is primarily the F&B industry in India is primarily run by men, by maybe because of the nature of business or whatever. Of course, now you see a lot of women owners coming up, etc. But which means there's a lot of competition for you as well. right? You competition being backed by larger corporations, etc., etc. Do you ever feel that there is a boys club exists out there, and you are not obviously not part of it, and it kind of sabotages your brand or you or whatever? How do you, I mean, of course, because I'm sure that competition is there, and when men come together, that's boys club. uh and
Yeah.
because there's majority and because there's majority.
I did
uh,
feel that at the start. I did. I couldn't ever articulate what that was, but I did feel it at the start of Low 15. Also because there was no culture of like chefs hanging out, etc. It was mostly restaurateurs and more. So I did feel it. But you know what? We, like a bunch of us chefs, we just got together and we were like, hey, let's all be friends. And so now we're a group of 25, 30 chefs across the city and even more that all meet, hang, we go to each other for advice. We kind of, so that was just, that didn't exist. So I think that thing of just being like, hey, we all can be friends and it doesn't have to be like, I'm better than you and this is competition and this and that. So that change happened about 8 years ago when Kelvin and I one night was like, every Monday night we're doing chef's night. And all of us are free on Monday night, so we'd all meet every Monday, drink, and just like get to know each other better. But it does exist. I don't think it's as bad as it would be in a corporate world, but in the initial years of Love 15, yeah, I think that was. But did it stop me from doing what I wanted to do, or was it a deterrent in business? I don't think so.
Interesting. I guess I think you found answers or solutions for things in your own manner always. Tell me, with respect to, I'm going back to content and podcast and books. Okay, it's also my way of understanding this thing. I'm a content person. I work with mentors, etc. I work with creators, etc. Right? There's a lot of creators today, especially people who are maybe 4 or 5 years old in the entire content funnel. Right? They're all what do you say? Burnt out, right? Because that constant thing, I mean, burning out can happen even in the business, but especially with content as a process, because there's a loop that happens. How have you managed to not get burnt out putting content out there? Like, and you're doing a lot of content. You're actually creating a lot of content as good as any full-time content creator would do. I know it's a skill set, but still, what are those? What I mean,
I think, and I understand where you're coming from, and I felt that last year when the lockdown happened, and suddenly life was kind of paused, right? And that time, so like I said, for me, content creation happens as a byproduct of what I'm doing, and then suddenly I wasn't doing anything, So that was definitely for me the first time when I understood this, and I was like, oh. Real respect to people who like wake up every morning and say, this is what I'm going to create today. And then I started thinking of things and saying, okay, if I had to do that, what would I create? If I didn't have Low 15, what would I do? What kind of content would I create? And that's the first time I started thinking about it, and I've actually put it into action. And I have
I've been seeing your videos.
Yeah, I have a new series called Talk Pastry to Me that launches soon on Instagram. And it's basically just me meeting different chefs and having them teach me one thing every week. Because I believe I believe in learning and being a student always. So I was like, okay, what would be really cool is for all these amazing, talented people. And I haven't been to pastry school in 10 years. So I was like, come and teach me something new and we learn how to do something together. And so if I'm going to be a content creator, then this is the kind of content I will create. That's also educational, that people can see. It's going to be delicious, etc. So that was, something that sparked this idea. But for, the most part of it, because my days are so busy and so full, and I just do it as an extension of what I'm doing, it's easier. But when work stopped and that paused, it became very challenging.
Thought of ideas. I mean, on that note, it's interesting you mentioned about this series. I was actually referring to the kind of videos that you've been putting about your life, your work life, and stuff like that. You've been, I think, off late, little been putting. A lot of people see you as somebody who's amazingly networked. Okay, I would see it as a byproduct of the work that you've done all these years, the clients that you've
Yeah.
had, and all of that. But still, is there something that people can learn from the fact that how do you maintain with so many people around you? How do you manage to be in touch with people remembering you on some of the most important moments of their life? And this business has tough competition between home chefs to what you've built, to five-star
Yeah.
hotels, to etc.
Yeah.
I think it's more of the experience that you provide as an individual, as a brand, etc. But tell me, how in all of this, how do women network, especially women, because we're always a little hesitant to reach out first. We're always little hesitant to do that small talk. Men can easily do it. Women find it a little more difficult to do. When you started out, how was it? Versus, of course, I know that things are easier now. But when you started out, what was it like?
So when I started out, it was actually, I was 23. I had lived in Europe for 5 years. I studied hospitality. I lived in a school where I was with 60 different nationalities. My roommate was Brazilian. My best friend was German. It was just a way where my mind just kind of opened in a way where it was like the world just came together for me. And so when I came back, I had all of this energy of newness and discovery. And I wanted to, when I left India when I was 17, you have such a specific idea of who you really are. And then you kind of really discover your personality and uncover that. And I'm a hospitality student. This is what we do. This is the business of hospitality, right? It's of meeting people and experiences and all of that. So for me, I love it. I love meeting people. I love having people over. I love getting to know people. I have a strange thing of I'll always remember people's birthdays, what they like, and allergies. Like I meet you once, if you tell me your birthday, I met someone 8 years ago and I know when their birthday is and what they're allergic to. Like I just seem to remember these things without having to try. So I think it's also about making people feel special. And I think, like you said, when you're in a profession which is part of people's special moments and you just also become attached to that memory and joy and happiness for that. So actually, when I started, it was great because I wasn't going out at all. I was just working long hours, but I was creating, the work I was doing was for people's, occasions that they sort of remembered and then I feel like friendships just form naturally, you know a lot of people, but then there are certain friends that come together, certain friendships fall apart. I think it's just a part of life. I don't think that I genuinely just love people. I love getting to know people, and that's where it comes from.
I really want to know what your childhood has been, because here's this person who's an entrepreneur, who's very, very creatively inclined, who's very self-aware, and loves people. What a good combination. I mean, no wonder you've been able to
if you're a fat kid when you're growing up, and it's just, I just feel like a lot of those challenges from my youth are actually things that are helping me now, because it's just, you've always been this person who's, I've always been like this since I was little. There wasn't, I was always the friend, the girl in school who was everybody's, who brought cake to school and who was, and then you kind of learn to pick and choose and see, who are the people that really matter to you. And then over time, it becomes clearer and things, but the essence of the person still remains the same.
Absolutely. And it all builds up in the form of a story, the story that you've created. Interesting. Pooja, I think we're almost done with our lots of questions. I think for me, the most important part is, and the most beautiful part I think I've got from this conversation is how self-aware you are. And you've been like that, for a very
it's
long time.
It's a work in progress. It's a lot of therapy. It's a lot of coaching. It's not like, it's a work in progress. It's not something that happens overnight.
So we all evolve and we all learn, and that's how we improvise.
Yeah.
Tell me, if you were to take back from, I mean, it's a very common question, but if you were to take back, what are the 3 most important things or priorities looking back at your life and now, what are the three most important things in your life now? From a priority perspective.
Sorry, I don't think.
What are the top three priorities in your life?
That's a tough one. I think the answer would be very different 18 months ago.
Sure.
Today, I think my first priority is truly my family and myself, to make sure that we all are okay, that we are that I'm spending enough time with my family, that I'm giving enough time to my relationships and my commitments. Building Love 15 and seeing it grow, and all the different ideas and plans that I have for it would be number 2. And then number 3 would be just to keep learning something new always. I feel like when you stop learning things, you become stagnant. So I don't want to be stagnant. I want to just flow and see what comes next.
Okay, the last loaded question, and I know it's the heaviest question of this thing. We started with it, but what in building all of this, what is ultimately your purpose? Why do you do all of this?
I think it's a work in progress. I'm understanding it every day as we go, and every year I learn something new. A lot of it has just been about understanding myself better and getting to know who I really am without being apologetic about it. But yeah, we talk about this at Love 15 a lot, and I think the main purpose, in whatever form or shape it is just to bring more joy into people's lives. So whether that is through food, whether that is through a podcast, whether that's through a book, it doesn't matter, because the center of it is always about joy.
Beautiful. If I were to tell you, I think what you do is you create memories for people, and beautiful memories. So thank you for doing that. And I think thank you for inspiring so many women across the country, men and women. And I think in my mind, building something which is not there, which is always the toughest part, and surviving, sometimes, just slithering through it, sometimes failing badly, and actually acknowledging your failures. So thank you for doing all of that and creating, examples for us to follow.
Thank you so much.
If you've enjoyed this conversation, please make sure you hit the like button, comment what was your favorite part, and also subscribe to the channel. We have lots of fantastic people coming up. This podcast is available on your podcast app by the name Questions I Wanted to Ask. You can also follow me on social media for more updates, short format content. Links will be in the description.